for another grammar point with me, Teacher Katie. In these videos, we dive into the details of English grammar to see how it works. Let's get started. Now everybody, today we are looking at active sentences and passive sentences, and we're going to start by reviewing that active sentence structure. I'm sure you're already familiar with the common English structure of subject, verb, object. We can see that in this example sentence. The cat ate the goldfish, whereas the cat is our subject, ate is our verb, and the goldfish is our object. So in an active sentence, the one who is doing the action, in this case the cat, comes first before the action, and then the one that is receiving the action, in this case the goldfish, would come last in the sentence. So we have the cat who is eating, they're doing the action, so they come first, and the goldfish which is being eaten, that's receiving that action, and it's coming last in the sentence. Now, when we want to change an active sentence to a passive sentence, we just need to flip that sentence structure so that it is the mere opposite of an active sentence. So if we look right here, here's a picture of a baby looking in the mirror, and you can see an active sentence is like that baby, whereas the passive sentence works as the reflection of that baby, with a couple changes here. So here's our active sentence again. If I want to change this to a passive sentence, what I'm going to do is flip that subject, verb, object order, and what was originally the object of our sentence in the active sentence, which is the goldfish, now becomes the subject of our sentence. And what was originally the subject now becomes the object. So you can see right here, we have switched the goldfish and the cat, and we've added a little word there in front of our new object, by. We're going to call that the by phrase. You'll also notice that our verb has changed. In our active sentence, it was ate, but now in our passive sentence, the form of that verb has changed to a passive form, in this case, was eaten. So, here's an example showing how that sentence changed, where we flip-flopped the subject and the object, and we changed our verb and added that by phrase. Now, looking at the verb, you can see that it's made up of two parts. We have the be verb, in this case was, and then we have the past participle of eat, which is eaten. So that be verb is taking on the verb tense from the active sentence. You can see the active sentence is in simple past tense. So now our be verb will take on that simple past tense change and become was. The past participle will always stay the same as it is a past participle. That be verb will be what shows us the verb tense in our passive sentences. So here's a little chart showing how that be verb changes depending on which verb tense you're using. So you can take a look. If you feel like you want to pause the video to take some notes, you can go ahead and do that. Today we're not going to practice all of those verb tenses. We're just going to work on these 6 because the past perfect and the future perfect are less common in passive. And you can see usually we do not use the future progressive at all in the passive tense. So here are a couple examples from each of the verb tenses. Changing an active sentence to a passive sentence. Here's using present simple. The teacher helps the students becomes the students are helped by the teacher. Here's a simple past tense example. My family ate the pizzas becomes the pizza was eaten by my family. In present progressive, also known as present continuous, I have Jenna is writing the letter, and that changes to the letter is being written by Jenna. Past progressive or past continuous, Daniel was opening the mail, changes to the mail was being opened by Daniel. In present perfect, we have Anna has read that book, changing to the book has been read by Anna. And in future simple using will, we have the manager will plan the meeting, or the meeting will be planned by the manager. Now, of course, will is not the only way that we can express future simple. We also have be going to verb. So here's that same sentence again, but with be going to. The manager is going to plan the meeting changes to the meeting is going to be planned by the manager. All right, now that you've seen several examples from each of the 6 verb tenses we'll be practicing, it's time for you to do a little practice. So, there are 4 stages to practice time. The first is to pause the video. The second is to get a piece of paper or a notebook so that you can write down your answers to the questions. Then after that, you should press play on the video and check your answers along with me. So let's get started. Here are 6 sentences. I'd like you to complete the passive sentences with the correct form of be. Now remember, you should pause the video and write down your answers on a sheet of paper now. All right, welcome back. It's time to check your answers. Let's look at number 1 first. Tom paints my house changes to my house is painted by Tom. Number 2, Tom painted my house now becomes my house was painted by Tom. Number 3, Tom is painting my house changes to my house is being painted by Tom. Number 4, Tom was painting my house is now my house was being painted by Tom. Number 5, Tom has painted my house changes to my house has been painted by Tom. And finally, number 6, Tom will paint my house is now my house will be painted by Tom. How did you do? Go ahead and write down the correct number out of 6 to see how you did. Now we're going to talk about singular versus plural and how we handle that in the passive tense. So, just like in active sentences, the subject of passive sentences determine whether you use the singular or plural form of be. So, look at these 2 sentences. Mr. Jones paints this house. Mr. Jones paints several houses. So you can see the only thing that's different here is the object. In the first sentence, we have a singular object, this house. And in the second sentence, we have a plural object, several houses. So in these active sentences, our subject, Mr. Jones, is singular, so the verb paints stays the same in both sentences. But when we change this to passive sentences, you can see that our objects now become our subjects, which means that we need to change our verb based on whether our subject is singular or plural. So we have this house is painted by Mr. Jones, or several houses are painted by Mr. Jones. So you can see the same thing is true even when we're using continuous tense or past tense, or even when we use perfect tense. Now let's talk about pronouns. When changing an active sentence to passive, remember to change the object pronoun to a subject pronoun and vice versa. Vice versa just means the other way around. So here's a chart showing our subject pronouns and our object pronouns and how they change. And I've got 3 sentences here as examples so you can see how that change happens. So with my active sentences, the manager called me, I'm changing that object pronoun me to I whenever I change it to a passive sentence. I was called by the manager. In the second example, she wrote the letter. You can see my subject pronoun she changes to an object pronoun her. The letter was written by her. And finally, in my last example, I've got both a subject and an object pronoun for you. So we are helping them becomes they are being helped by us. There's one more note that I'd like to tell you about passive sentences. Whereas in an active sentence, we need to say who is doing the action. In a passive sentence, it's possible to talk about an action that occurred without knowing who did it. So, that by phrase that we talked about earlier can be omitted from passive sentences for several reasons. Number one would be because the one during the action is unknown. We might also omit it because it doesn't add value to the sentence. Or because the speaker wants to keep the identity of the person a secret. So here are a couple examples of each. Here's one showing because the one doing the action is unknown. So I've got my wallet was stolen by someone. If I don't know who stole my wallet, it's really not necessary for me to say by someone. So we could just say my wallet was stolen and omit that by phrase. In the second example, we see one example of a by phrase being omitted because it doesn't add value to the sentence. The house was cleaned by the maid. Now, perhaps I know I have a maid, you know I have a maid, everyone knows I have a maid. If I'm saying this, then it's not necessary for me to explain who cleaned the house because logically the maid would be the one cleaning the house. So in this case, I would just say the house was cleaned. In the last example, you can see a by phrase being omitted because the speaker wants to keep the identity of the person a secret. So perhaps I broke your phone and I need to tell you, but I don't really want you to be mad at me. So instead of saying your phone was broken by me, I might just say your phone was broken and omit that little fact that I was the one who broke it. So it's time to do some practice again. I've got 6 sentences here. These are all active sentences. I'd like you to change them to passive sentences. So it's time to pause the video and answer those questions. All right, let's go ahead and check your answers. Number 1, farmers grow by rice becomes rice is grown by farmers. Number 2, the doctor is seeing her becomes she is being seen by the doctor. Number 3, workers were washing the windows becomes the windows were being washed by the workers. Number 4, Greg called them becomes they were called by Greg. Number 5, Laura has fixed the car twice. The car has been fixed twice by Laura. And the last one, number 6, my father will email the landlord becomes the landlord will be emailed by my father. And you can see, and each of these I've put the by phrase in parentheses because it is optional whether or not you want to include that. Alright, it's time to do some extended practice. So I'd like you to imagine that a robber broke into your house when you were on vacation. And write 4 sentences in the passive voice about what he did. Okay, remember, you could include that by phrase by a robber, but it is not necessary. So if you want to just write the things that happened, you can certainly do that, omitting by the robber. Thanks for watching. This has been a Grammar Point with me, Teacher Katie. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them below. And remember, if you're currently taking one of the courses, please submit your answers to the extended practice section using the link that was provided to you at the beginning of your course session. That's all for now, and until next time, keep practicing English!